Welcome back to the official Atari Games podcast. This is Jason here. And, they're always fun, but this is a fun one, again, as they all are, because we are talking about Volgar the Viking II, which is an upcoming digital Eclipse release. And joining me today, we got Calvin Vu, the producer on the title. Calvin, how's it going?
Going good, Jason. Happy to be here.
Great. Welcome to the pod. And also joining me is, now I've rehearsed how I'm going to say your name in my head, and let's see if I nail it in real time here. Christopher Durrschmidt.
Yep, that's really good. That's really
Hell
good.
yeah. All right. And he is the creative director and CEO of Crazy Viking Studios. Chris, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason.
Awesome. Great to have you. The game is awesome. We'll get into that later. For now, I got a little bit of housekeeping for you guys. First of all, podcast reviews. I mentioned on the last one, which I recorded yesterday, but dropped 2 weeks ago. Please review the podcast. Go to iTunes, put in some written reviews, say whatever you want. I will read them on the air. If you posted them between the last one and this one, the time between those recordings was less than 24 hours. So I assure you I will get to those in the coming podcast. Know that I will be basically recording all the podcasts through the beginning of September before the end of July. So keep the reviews coming, and I will get to reading them at that point. But if you listen to the last one, you know that I'm a man of my word, and I'm reading them. So get out there, give us reviews. It helps the algorithm, helps get the word out, helps people find us. Join the Atari Discord. Links below. So check that out. Join the Discord. Have some fun. Yars Rising. That's our next big release at Atari. Going to want to wishlist that. Also, if you want the physical edition, you could pre-order that. You go to bestbuy.com, amazon.com, all your favorite retailers. You could pre-order the physical edition of Yars Rising. That will be coming soon. Now, we're here to talk about Volgarr. We will dive deeper into that. And Calvin's got some news before we get into some gameplay.
Thanks, Jason. First off, just really happy to be talking about this game. Happy that it's out there and people are finally going to be able to see it being played. It's been a good journey getting here, and just seeing it out, getting some positive reception, and hearing people just talk about it is just such a good feeling. So, Vogar the Viking II is the big push that we have from Digital Eclipse side. Game is out for pre-order right now on major platforms: PS5, PS4, Switch, Xbox Series X, Xbox One, and GOG. And for Steam, you can wishlist it right now. If you haven't played the first game, we also have it bundled together, and that's available. All those are available for purchase or pre-order at a discount right now, and the game is going to be officially coming out on August 6th, 2024. That's me plugging the game and all the places where you could find it for right now. Pre-order, purchase, wishlist. Happy to get any of the support that we can here. Beyond Volgar the Viking 2 for Digital Eclipse side has been a busy summer for us. We also announced our Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind at Summer Game Fest. And so there's just a lot of good buzz around the studio right now, and we've got quite a few exciting more projects that I can't quite talk about yet, but you'll be seeing a bit more from Digital Eclipse before the year is up and going into next year.
Well, I'm in the spirit of making promises. I promise you this will not be the last time we feature a Digital Eclipse game on this podcast, because there's some cool stuff a-brewing that I can't talk about. So all those links, conveniently enough, also in the description. So whether you're listening on podcast or on YouTube, check that out. Click the links to your store of choice and go wishlist Volgarr 2. Now, we're going to talk about that. It's like I'm just teasing constantly, but I got a warm-up question, guys. I haven't done like one of these warm-up questions in a while, but this is a good one. Now, the last episode, it was a big mailbag. Got a bunch of questions from the audience and users, and I kind of asked, like, ask whatever you want, and it doesn't have to be actually related to Atari. And I like asking these warm-up questions because they're just a way to stretch our legs, as it were, right? And they're not game related, and this is a good one. And this was submitted by 7 of 7, and he didn't know he was submitting that questions that I'll be using for warm-ups, but here we are. And I think since we're talking about Vikings, who are known for what else? Their fashion. He asked this question: what has been the most embarrassing thing you've ever worn? So, Kris, you're giggling like you got something on your mind. So let's hear it.
Man, the most embarrassing thing I've ever worn.
Yeah. And now here's the thing: there's multiple ways to think about this question, because you could say, I wasn't embarrassed, but other people could perceive this as being embarrassing. Because sometimes, you could wear something and be like, yeah, I'm owning this. I understand I look silly.
I've worn a mascot outfit for work before as a teenager. That was kind of embarrassing for everybody.
What was can you say what the mascot was?
Yeah, it was for like a local restaurant in Annapolis, Maryland. It was some kind of like a vermin mouse thing. I don't even. It's like It's not a famous one. It's not like Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. It was like some restaurant in Annapolis, Maryland. It was smelly, embarrassing. I'm 6'1", so I didn't really fit in it. So the pants and the top kind of separated by like a few inches, and my arms came all the way out. So it was like I looked like like someone stuck a mascot thing stretched out on a monster. So it was like it was pretty embarrassing for everybody.
That is awesome. I feel like whenever there is a mascot costume, there is a very specific sweet spot height and size.
Oh, yeah, you're supposed to be under a certain height for it. Yeah, they didn't have anybody else. So,
but even if you're below that height, then you can't like necessarily see through the eye holes or something like that, right?
Yeah,
so
you have to have people walk around with you and hold your hand and guide you and stuff like that. Yeah, you'll see that a lot at different parks and things too, when people just maybe just a little too short.
Yeah, that'll be me. I'd be too small. Walking around like that. All right, Calvin, how about yourself?
Yeah. So for a Halloween, I decided to dress up as one of my favorite characters, which is Toad from Mario and Mario Kart. So I got it was just the costume was just the I don't know what you call like open chested vest, and then the little mushroom hat, and then I put on some like white basketball shorts and sneakers and just walked around, celebrated Halloween. And I was like, I mean, it's already kind of like embarrassing, just like the whole like open vest shirtless thing. But like Toad himself is like this like happy high pitched type guy, and it was in Santa Barbara, which I don't know if you've heard anything about UC Santa Barbara, but they're not sober there on Halloween. It's like people would
that's the real question. Where is sober on Halloween?
It's a good point. So people would just be coming to me over the night, and like throughout the night, they'd just like try to Pillsbury Doughboy me. And like at first it was like very like weird and invasive, because like I don't want random people touching my belly button. But obviously as the night continues to go on, it's just like like every time that it happens.
Man, you went from Toad to the Pillsbury Doughboy. That's great.
Yeah, I went from Toad to the Pillsbury Doughboy. I don't know why that was a thing. People trying to get Yahoo out of me. And so, yeah, that was a fun, kind of embarrassing wardrobe moment. And apparently if you take off the Toad hat and you're just in that, like vest, you look like Aladdin. So it was like a double purpose costume.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that was probably the most embarrassing thing I decided to wear, and I no longer use that costume. But
That's awesome. That's awesome. For myself, it's a tough question to answer, because I'm not sure. I'm sure there's plenty of examples, but none that stand out. So I could just say that, Halloween related as well. My go-to, the only thing I do for Halloween now is I put on a hoodie that is basically meant to be like Monokuma, the villain from Danganronpa, who's this black and white bear. So I'd say I know it's embarrassing by the fact that I only wear it one day of the year, but I will do it, and I'll do it with pride. And I don't know how many people know what it is. I don't care. But instead, I just look like I'm walking around with this half black, half white hoodie. And then there's like a weird belly button thing in the middle of it. And that's, and the hood, if you put the hood up, it's got like the little ears things and like some teeth. So if you like pull it down, then it's a terrible terrible replication of Monokuma. Like, there's so many problems. I have so many notes for whoever made this thing, but I'm more embarrassed for the fact that it's not Monokuma enough than the fact that I'm dressing like Monokuma on Halloween, which is a character that zero people in this country would know what it was while walking by in the street. That's not true. There's at least 100 of us out there.
The costume sounds cool. I mean,
It's barely even a costume. That's the other reason why I should be embarrassed. It's like the most low effort Halloween costume. The only thing more low effort than that is when someone puts on a red hat with an M on it. They're like, "Hey, I'm Mario." It's like, you're not. You're just some guy. All right. Well, that was enough vamping. Let's talk about Volgarr 2. All right, shall we? Let's do it. So, if you're listening to the audio, I encourage you to go over to the YouTube channel so you can see some of this gameplay in action. You can see me not suffer. I have a great time playing Volgarr 2. And you guys can see here that I got to 1-2. I don't know if that's good, but that's what I did in my warm up here. But we're just going to jump right into the start. So I want to know. Let's start with a little bit of background. What is the origin of Volgarr 2, other than, of course, Volgarr 1?
You want to take that, Calvin?
I feel like you might be better equipped to answer this one. But, I can't.
Like, as a question, like how did Volgarr 2 come to be, or what is the story behind Volgarr 2 versus Volgarr 1?
Yes, we got time.
All right. So in Volgarr 2, it's been roughly a little more than a decade of events that have passed Volgarr 1. Volgarr is now the leader of the land in which he rules. And he's responsible for his village and Vikings and everybody around him. And then, without spoiling too much of the story for people to discover themselves, a enemy that he encountered in the first game returns and starts attacking, as you just saw in the opening sequence. And so he goes out. He's like, "There's big, what the heck is going on?" type of deal, and sets out on his quest of blood and vengeance, like he did in the first one. It's basically the first game. Odin just appears and points his finger and says, "Go kill things," and that's what he does. He gets arrested in the first game. Just so you get a little perspective and a backstory of who Volgarr is. Volgarr was just a Viking warrior with his clan, and their village gets attacked by an army of lizardmen. And he valiantly dies saving his village. So he fights at the front line, and while his village is escaping, he fights and fights and fights and fights, and he's wounded over and over again. And it's like the Frazetta painting where he's standing on a huge pile of bodies, just fighting and becoming tired. Eventually, he succumbs. But what he does is he buys time for the people to escape, and he dies so valiantly that Odin takes notice himself and gives him a second lease on life and says, "Hey, I'm really busy dealing with this war in the Nine Realms with the giant frost giants and the dark elves and stuff like that. But there's a problem in Midgard with a dragon. I need you to go take care of that for me." So he gives him this power of resurrection. He brings him back to life in Midgard, where he can die over and over and over again. And with the help of the Valkyries, go and attack the dragon Fafnir and deal with that problem on Midgard, which he does in the first game. And his reward is that he gets to live his life knowing that he gets returned to his mortal life and live out to his old age. But he also gets to know that he gets to go to Valhalla for sure, because he did these things for Odin. But in the second game, this time has passed. He's become a king, and now he's on this new adventure.
Yeah. Now,
without spoiling too much of the story, but
yeah, totally. Don't want to spoil any of the story for Volgarr 2 or even Volgarr 1. I guess you kind of already did that. But
it's been a decade, so there's got to be some kind of threshold there if you haven't done it yet.
Fair enough. So gameplay wise, how would you describe what was the intent in Volgarr 1, like creating this style of game, and then how has that changed leading into Volgarr 2?
Oh, that's actually a really good question.
Love it.
So the not that I'm surprised to get a good question out of you, Jason. Sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to
you
sound
should
like
be.
that.
Because I know leading into this, by the way, because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna play the game while recording. They're like, really? I was like, yeah, trust me, we
Well,
can do
yeah, not
this.
easy. So the gameplay, why the type of gameplay that Volgar is. Okay, so there wasn't anything like it at the time. Excuse me, I'm gonna do something really gross here.
All right, it is a Viking game.
Sorry about
Vikings
that.
are
I
known
didn't
for
mute
their
myself.
Vikings aren't necessarily known for their manners or their couthness.
Yeah, a little
Couthness?
bit of carbonation going on this morning. I had to burp. Sorry. Um, there wasn't anything out like it at the time. So Taryn and I on the original game, when we were thinking about the game that we wanted to make as our first game, um, we thought about the games that we wanted to play, but nobody was making, and that was basically AAA games from the late '80s and up to like the mid '90s. Um, so we really like games like Magic Sword, Rastan. Obviously, there's an homage in the first game. The first 10% of the map is a direct homage to Rastan, um, and Super Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what came
A
to
lot of
mind
the movement
immediately.
is that the way that Volgarr jumps is like Super Ghouls and Ghosts. So you have to think about uh, it's an action game, but it's also a bit of a puzzle platformer in the fact that you have to think about how your jumps are going to be and how the jumps work. You have to plan your jumps because you can't move in the air like Mario and stuff. And so how we settled on these mechanics is because is that there just wasn't any other games doing that, and we wanted to play more of those games. And since nobody else was making them, we decided to make it ourselves because we're like, well, if we want to play this, there's got to be other people out there that want to play this. And the kind of unfortunate side effect of this is that because we made the game, we couldn't enjoy it in the way that the reason that we made it is a direct conflict in the enjoyment that we got out of it because we wanted to play a new game like this. We're like, well, we'll just make it ourselves. But because we made it ourselves, we didn't get that. We're still not getting that. Other people aren't doing this, so we're not getting that raw, unfiltered new experience of playing something new like this. But we're making it for other people. Like, what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, because one of the things, like, and if you're watching me on stream, you'll see I'm really good at this game and only died like 4 times in the past 5 minutes. So the one of the biggest things with these games is the challenge. So inherently, the enjoyment that you get from the game should come from that challenge as well.
Yeah,
And
the
if you made
challenge
the
and
game,
discovery.
then
Mm-hmm.
you know how to do it all, and therefore that discovery and that challenge is minimized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the surprise, there's no surprises there. Like, you don't get surprised by the bosses and the discovery of going, oh, I didn't know about that boss, or finding the secret areas, or secret powers and things like that. Things that aren't uh, overtly explained.
Yep.
There's things and secrets in this game that aren't talked about, like, and won't be taught in the tutorial or anything like that. It's for the players just to discover. Um,
And what was the relationship between you guys and Digital Eclipse? Like, how did that happen?
well, I worked at Digital Eclipse at the time.
Well, there you go. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so at the time I was a creative director for Bothell and for Digital Eclipse, and while working on some other projects, um, a different publisher had reached out and said, "Hey, we want to get Volgar 2 made. Can you do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm working at some other place. It would be wrong to do that." And so talked to Mike about it, and it was a really good fit for them at the time because Digital Eclipse wants to make games like this. And as you can tell with Power Rangers and other things that are going on, that's kind of like another avenue that Digital Eclipse is working on. So it kind of fit, and so we took it on in Digital Eclipse. Did two things there: allowed to stay in the family. I didn't have to quit because I was
Nice.
going to make Volgar 2 regardless because the opportunity came up. So it was either stay and do it or leave and do it. And everybody was very excited about it, so we made it in house. So it made it really easy because my two jobs kind of merged. Up until that point, I was working two different jobs. Right, I was having to do all the Crazy Viking stuff on a day-to-day basis, and then also my full-time job with Digital Eclipse. So it was very difficult for about 6 years where I was working there doing that. But that's the story of that.
Yeah, and so we kind of worked like together as like Crazy Viking Studios, being Kris and Volgar the Viking, and all that like creative energy, designing the original game and having the property of it, and then Digital Eclipse provided me as a producer, but we also put together a team. Ted was the designer who worked on the first game as well with Kris, and it was awesome to have him on the team working on the sequel, and brought in some engineering and art talent. So I guess that's kind of like how Crazy Viking and Digital Eclipse worked together to make this game. Really, really small, tight-knit team that got it made.
Yeah. How long was the development process for this one? I guess between
longer
1 and 2.
than we wanted it to be.
It always is longer than you want it to be. That's every game. Every game is longer than you want it to be. Can you think of one? Actually, I can actually think of one example I've worked on. But can you think of one game that you've worked on where like everything went exactly according to schedule, and it was exactly what you wanted it to be?
In my 20-something year career, I think in 25 years and shipping about 50 games, I think about maybe about 65% of them go like to 100%. But I mean, it happens a lot. Yeah. Frequently games do run over, and every game faces challenges, right?
Totally. Oh, man.
And this is no exception. Volgar 2, there's no exception to that. I mean, you have to think that the initial plan was it was going to take a year. It took about a year and 4 or 5 months. Or something
I would say all the games that I've worked on, not a single game went from the idea that it was before you started making it, what you planned to set out to make, to what it ended up being. Not all of those pieces came together. And if it was somehow able to get done in the amount of time that you wanted to get done by, then there's definitely things that fell off the wagon on the way there.
Yes.
That's just what game development has been like in my career.
Totally.
One of the really fun things about it, though, and one of the really fun challenges about bringing Volgar to existence was you have to think the first game was made on a proprietary engine that came out and that we started working on in 2011. So it's, it was a really old system that hasn't been touched in a very long time. So everything had to be modernized to work with, the way that, operating systems and consoles and everything work nowadays. So there's a lot of work that had to go there too. When things start to get that old, you start emulating things, but this is like having to make it from the ground up to work on modern systems. So there's some of that stuff that had to go on too.
So what is Volgar 2 made in then?
The same proprietary engine. We had to update.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of heavy lifting that went into that to bring it up to speed. Because we're not using anything like Unreal or Unity or anything like that.
So what do you find that like in creating a game like this, it's like, I think nowadays there's always that question of challenge. I mean, you're hearing that challenge question come up now with Elden Ring, with the with the difficulty issues, and the people are like, oh my god, I brought this crazy character that's like over leveled, and now I get to this new content and it's still insanely hard. How do you go about balancing something like this, something that's intended to be incredibly difficult, while keeping it fun and engaging? Like, how do you think about that design?
I love that question. I absolutely love that question. And the thing is and this is not to disparage Elden Ring and other games like that, because those games are wonderful. And
I think if you say that, I think I already know where you're going to go with this.
Well, yeah, they're wonderful in the way that they're like that. But one of the reasons why I believe Volgar stands out and why it is addictive and fun and challenging at the same time is that Volgar doesn't level up. You don't get more powerful throughout the experience of the game. Like, you're not level 100 by the end or something like that. You are what you are from the very beginning all the way through. Now, you do get a little bit of power-ups here and there, but they're very controlled adjustments to the way that the character is, and the character has built-in flaws. So when we go to design new enemies and design scenarios, we know everything that Volgarr can do because he doesn't change. So for instance, if you were playing this and it's like a more of a modernized traditional, like you get experience and you get new moves and you're becoming more powerful throughout the game, we're constantly having to figure out ways to make enemies more and more and more and more powerful to counter that. But we also don't know if you're putting points into skill tree B or skill tree C or a mixture of, and so we don't know what your character's like. So things get kind of weird. With Volgarr, we know exactly what he does. And so we can make very precise challenges for him and very precise challenges for the player. One of the things with Volgarr is that he doesn't have a way to stab above him. Like he can't. So we know he's weak to that. Um, he's strong in doing other things, but we know if we throw enemies that kind of come down like that bat you just killed, like you dealt with that in a very particular way. But if you stand under that bat, he can drop on you, and there's not much you can do except for get out of the way. You can't be aggressive from beneath.
Yeah.
So things of that nature, and that's why this kind of game stands out in its design versus a lot of things out there currently.
Yeah. That old the adage. I never actually said that word out loud. But that people will say, "Oh, that get good thing."
Well, yes,
It's like
because it's
not really. Your get good in the spirit of a From game is also you could level yourself up and then you'll
well,
be
it's time
fine.
spent.
Yeah.
It's time spent with the game versus
Yeah.
actually getting good. And Volgarr makes, by the end of the game, it isn't Volgarr that got better. It's you as a player who got
Right.
better when you beat the game. You got better, not him. And that's what makes you feel great and awesome about playing a game like this.
Yeah, totally. That
Yeah,
satisfaction, that
I'd say
old
during
school.
like the design process, what Kris talked about there is like knowing what Volgar can and cannot do from out the gate through to the end of the game is really reflective in like how the levels are made, how the enemies are decided upon. Right, every enemy has a purpose, and it's to address a weakness that Volgar has, and every enemy placement has a purpose. It's to add a new challenge that the player probably hasn't encountered yet before on their journey to where they are in the game, right? And every location that an enemy is placed is like meant to be put there in a fair amount of way, right? Trying to like maintain the level of challenge that is within the game, while not absolutely drowning the player in like overburdensome challenges, and kind of like maintaining that like growing more powerful by understanding the character, what they can do, understanding the enemies that you're going up against, and then kind of like throwing a wrench at you again with some weird level design or a new enemy type that you haven't encountered before. That's kind of like a pace that has taken a lot of thought and planning, and it really kind of like a unspoken principle that I feel like was behind the design of the game.
Yeah.
Also,
There's no gotchas.
Yeah, there's no gun. The game is very fair, and we actually had many discussions over the development about any gotcha that we thought we ran into. Like, we do not want this game to have those moments that just feel like sucker punches. That's not a fun experience, right? You don't want to run into a challenge that you can't avoid.
You just earned an extra life.
We've had those removed.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think
kind of back on your initial question of how do you control challenge, or how do you set that challenge level? Our designer that helped work on this, Ted. No offense to him, because I tell him this all the time. He's an absolute masochist. So his choice of game design is grueling and like gruelingly punishing, and it's a good point to start from when he's putting these designs together, because we could kind of talk about it and rein it in and be like, like, wow, that felt really good, or like, like, wow, I didn't know that enemy type or that combination of enemies in an encounter could be that challenging, or hey, this is like god awful mean. Like, we need to change this. Like, I don't think this is a good experience for some people.
Yeah, there's always a part of the discussion where when you make a game like this and it's challenging, that because you have familiarity with like intimate inside familiarity with how the engine works, where the collision boxes are, invulnerability frames, things of that nature, that you can actually make things too hard for people who wouldn't have that inside knowledge about how the game works or the engine works and stuff. So there are things like Calvin was saying where we had to dial things back because it's in that realm. Like, oh, I didn't know that there's no way a player was going to figure out,
Right.
well, I won't say no way, but extremely low chance that someone would figure out, oh, there's some vulnerability frames on this one thing on Volgar or something like that. Like, so yeah, we had to dial it back. And I would like to say that one of the mandates in the design for Volgar 1 and for Volgar 2 was that you should and you can successfully complete every encounter that happens in this game the first time you encounter it, if you're paying attention and going slow enough. It's possible to not get hurt at all the first time you see it. But the thing is that most people don't play like that. Like they're happy to go along really quickly, or they're not quite up to whatever, so they get kind of surprised by things. But it is possible, and
Like that
people have beaten this
example-
game in like 15 minutes.
Like that example that I just got to, I mean, not that one where I just died, but before that, I encountered that floating bomb guy, and, I see him, I'm swinging into the rope. I'm like, okay, well, if I go forward, I'm going to hit him. So I could go backwards, land on this platform safely, and throw a spear at him. And now I know he's over here, so I could just take him out that way.
Yep.
Gain a little bit of speed. Learning.
Yeah, this game definitely encourages learning through pain. Kind of a big design principle, I guess, behind it.
And the good news is you're not charging a quarter every time, like in Ghouls and Ghosts.
Back in the day.
Correct.
The games that this is hearkening to.
Which is actually a really fun, now you bring that up, that's actually a really fun design challenge too, because you want to make a game that feels like that, and a game that gives you that feeling of success when you accomplish these things. But at the same time, you're not designing a game that's designed to take money from people, right? So you have to kind of balance that design sensibility versus being unfair because you're trying to get some quarters out of people. But also at the same time, if you think about it in the arcade, you had unlimited lives if you had unlimited quarters. Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so Volgar has that sensibility to it. It's like you got a bag of holding with quarters in it, basically. So we had to like balance the game around that too, and then put it into the narrative about like why you have unlimited lives, why you can continue, or why you even have continues. Like, why do that? Well, there's a special narrative reason for it. If you continue enough, you'll find out. But that's why. It's all tied into the actual game and the experience and the difficulty and all that other stuff.
I like that. Right, forgot this guy.
Where you didn't get that in the arcade. Although it would have been kind of mind-blowing if you did, I think. Like, if something like that would have occurred back in the day with an arcade game, I think that would have probably knocked people's socks off.
Yeah. It's an interesting comment you brought up about difficulty, because it's something that, I've had to deal with it firsthand. And you kind of lose sight a little bit sometimes of the forest through the trees. Like my first experience of that was playing, was when we did Gravatar Recharged. And I told this story in the podcast before, so apologies, but it's like, that game is notorious for being difficult, like the original. And we make this game, and it's the first Recharge game that we made that actually had an ending. And I thought, oh my God, people are just going to see the ending. There's not enough content here. This isn't good. And I'm like, it's fun, it's great, but this just, man, what are we doing? And then I was like, it just feels too easy, knowing that I've played this thing so many times and just got really adept at it. And then it came out, and they're like, just like the original arcade, it's the hardest one yet, and it's so difficult, and it's so hard. And I was like, okay, if you say so. And then it actually happened very recently again with Lunar Lander Beyond, where people appreciated, if they knew the original game and they knew why we kept those original controls as they were with that thrusting and steering gameplay, they're like, yeah, it's great, just like the original. And then others were just like, it's just unnecessarily difficult, to where I thought it is. It's a tough one, especially when you're playing it over and over and over again. So checking yourself and balancing those things. And it goes back kind of to the time thing as well, right? Because I think a lot of people underestimate these kind of games, and they say, oh man, how does it take so long to make a game like this? And well, you got to kind of balance everything about it, right?
Oh yeah. Yes, that's the part that takes the longest. Getting that right is the thing that takes the longest. There's a lot of, this is a sequel, So there are things that came from the first game that allowed us to speed things up a little bit in the art side. But there's a lot, and of course we're not reinventing the wheel for a lot of aspects in gameplay for on the engineering side. But the design, coming up with the new design, the new armor mechanics, rebalancing that, all the enemies and stuff like that. Yeah, that by far took the longest. We would spend so much time placing one zombie, trying to figure out if that's actually a perfect thing, and moving the zombie maybe 5 pixels to the left, and then retrying 5 pixels to the right, and then maybe retrying the timing of when he comes back out, or maybe he doesn't need to be there at all. Maybe it's 2. Like, we had to refigure all this stuff out and move jumps a little bit. There's some, things that we had to do where we were figuring that jumps maybe have been a little too difficult. There's some advanced techniques that you need to use later on in the game that we don't actually teach. That were for more advanced players, but we needed to have a way for people that use those advanced techniques to have it go through faster. But people who played all the way through the game and never discovered those advanced techniques needed to be able to progress. Like, it couldn't be a blocker to finishing the game. Like, otherwise people would be like, "Oh, the game's broken." Like 80% of people would be like, "This game is unbeatable because this jump is impossible." But it's not. So we had to figure out ways to have all of those things be discoverable or work or whatever. But yeah, to answer your question, the design process, just the minutia of, because of particularly the game like this, even the jumping distances between the ropes that you're doing currently, like those things and the lengths of them and everything, took a long time of repeatedly doing it over and over and over and over and over again in house to make sure that every single scenario and thing that you're doing was perfect.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let this guy fall off the
cliff.
So
a lot of finagling. Everything that you're experiencing probably took a lot more time than you imagined it would take to get to this final feeling.
Yeah, it's hard to convey that. Yeah, it's really hard to convey that to anybody on the outside. Even when talking to other game developers, when I tell them how much time we spent on different individual scenarios and stuff, they're like, "Wow!" Because we wanted it to be right. So
and almost everything you encounter, there was a harder version of this that we had to dial back on,
or totally different. Yeah, or something that was
different.
completely different.
I always like having this question as well with when talking to teams, where it's like, can you reference anything specifically, like some favorite stories of things that were left on the cutting room floor during the process, like funny things that were just a little too comically difficult, or things that you were hoping to get in there but just didn't work because maybe it wasn't fun, anything like that?
I can tell you that that's a tough question to answer, because by doing so might cause some spoiler things. But I can tell you that maybe we can revisit that after the game comes out. But
okay.
But the Golem, the oh my god, I'm totally brain farting on this guy. This guy right here you're fighting. This giant guy. Carrion Beast. I forget what the name he gave him at the end.
Although he has a different name in the credits, but those are developers.
Cuddle Muffin or something? I don't know. I can't remember.
We made a bunch of goofy names. It's hard to remember. You call these things one thing for like a year, and then you're like, okay, let's give it some more fun to it. And you're always going to call it what you called it.
But he went through like 4 different versions, and there's a little bit of funny story with him, like the way he attacks, the way he walks, and the exploding and stuff like that. He went through like 4 different versions, and there's a creature that you encounter later on in the game that looks a little bit like a Frankenstein's monster. And when I was drawing that original monster, I ended up making him look too much like Frankenstein. Like, he actually looked like Frankenstein. I don't even know if I have that art around here somewhere anymore, but I'm sure that can come up in some kind of thing later. But pulling that up, that old art, I mean, he had like a big wooden shield put on him. He looked like a Frankenstein's monster, and he kind of lurched around. He was big like that, and he did a similar smashing thing, like a big punch. But they were like, but we also had this guy that you're supposed to make later on in the game that looked like Frankenstein already. So now we got all these Frankensteins. And I'm like, oh crap. So we had to go back to the drawing board. I was like, well, what if he's like this, boiled, covered, pustular thing that kind of has this gross arm that kind of just slops around and whatever. That sounded awesome. I mean, so he did the same thing, but I had to like make him work. And then of course we had to get the timing and everything down to make it feel good. But
I thought the original guy looked really cool.
He is. He was really, really cool. And I'm kind of sad he didn't get in the game. But yeah, that's one of the things. It's like maybe Volgar 3.
Huge Frankenstein head, and he had this club that he just like swung, pulled out.
Yeah, he was really cool.
You can see all like we kept the same like gameplay design for him there, right? He's large, he's lumbering, he has this kind of like surprise, not range, but like long range melee attack, but drastically changed. Now he's this like giant like sludge thing with boils, and he looks like he throws entrails instead of a club and stuff. So like all things about like the timing of it and how much space he takes up and what's his like damage collision box, like those stayed the same, but we had to like change the visual look of him so he wouldn't look too much like an enemy that we have later on in the game that's supposed to be taking some of those similar visual cues. And then that guy comes in and he doesn't look anything like the guy that we cut in the first place. So now we technically have like 3 different enemies, and one of them's just on the cutting board that looked really, really cool that we changed without really needing to change him. But in game development, like stuff is just so rapid fire, like need to make decisions that could impact things down the road, and those things you think that would happen down the road don't actually happen. So it's just like that's one of those like funny.
And it's always really funny about that because it's sometimes the things that you think will be extremely challenging and difficult to do go fast, and then sometimes you end up spending like weeks getting hung up on something like that guy. Like it's like bizarre. It's like all of a sudden you get hung up on this really dumb thing, and the whole team's kind of like, what do we do? Like over something like that. But then like something really complicated, it's just like, oh, it's no problem, get it done before lunch. Where you thought you're going to spend like 3 weeks on it. And it's just, you just never know in game development. Like anything can happen, really. That's one of the fun things about making video games, and frustrating, is that stuff happens.
We had another interesting one that I think we could talk about because it was like, I don't think it's like too crazy, or it's just like we had this idea of playing with Volgar's movement speed and like giving the player some type of agency to make him move faster. And we tried running with it for quite a while because we totally like thought it would be like, that's like a cool continuation of the Volgar experience and like really adding on to like a core mechanic for him. But after like definitely way too much time of trying to make it work, like we came to the conclusion that like this is just not what the Volgar like experience is, right? Like this isn't a Sonic game. It's not a Mario like run down the slope and like go super fast in a Tanuki suit type of feel. We just kind of like came back around to like a core principle of Volgar, which is like fixed movement, fixed distance,
a slower, more deliberate pace.
Right. Yeah. Like this is not a game where you're supposed to like
run
dash through it. It actually rewards cautious movement and playing. Although in the back end we have like a timer to like really mess with the speedrunners and anybody who has that type of like itch to play. Got to go fast. So
there are ways to move fast in this game. It's an advanced technique where you roll, throw a spear, jump, roll, throw a spear. It's like you have to keep repeatedly doing that, and you can move about 2.5 times faster than you could normally.
Wait, so rolls.
That's totally one of those things you see when
some very similar to what you're trying to do there. You got to roll, like that, but you got to keep going as soon as you hit the ground like that. Yeah, and you move a lot faster than you normally do.
Okay, that was the fastest lateral movement you could do in the game.
But you have to really
speedrunners doing that like in the first game all the time.
You have to really know what's coming up though, because
or
else you're really gonna mess yourself up.
So did you calibrate the variables then, knowing that that's going to be an option, or that's like that's for them to figure out, the speedrunners? If they're trying to manipulate the speed and go faster, then
we knew that in the original game. It was built in. Okay, that was built. That was built in for.
So the enemy encounter timing, is that actually in sync then for both options? Because I imagine like every time you start a game, then it's like everything resets. It's not like the level. Things are constantly moving. So if a rope is swinging one way and I hold forward at the start of a checkpoint, that rope is always going to be in the same place if I get there at the exact same time. Is that safe to assume? Did any of that make sense?
Yeah, yes, and no.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
The reason is that the rope. Okay, so we're going to talk about how the engine works a little bit. So
Ooh, it's
once
getting
you
nerdy.
load the map up, all the ropes in the map aren't currently swinging. They're tokenized.
Okay.
So basically, you'll get within a range of a rope and it'll activate. So it doesn't matter if you got there fast or it doesn't matter if you got there slow. It'll activate when you hit a certain area. So it'll always be where it's supposed to kind of be when you
Oh, I
get
see.
there. You
Okay.
follow what I'm saying? Like otherwise you could be, loading up a game, farting around in the beginning of it, and then you don't know what the rope timing is going to be, and then you don't have a meticulously designed event at that scenario. Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Yeah.
We want to
Yeah.
make sure that anytime you get to a rope, anytime you get to a creature encounter, anytime you get to a jumping puzzle bit, that it's always the same.
Yeah. It's always where you want it to be.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you, the designer, not necessarily. It may not be
Yeah.
where you, the player, want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want to clarify these things.
Yeah.
There's very little variation in how a play experience will go. Like almost everything is a fixed location where enemy will be placed, or a rope will be placed, or spikes are platforms, all that type of stuff. There's a few variables, like there's just areas where like enemies just keep spawning, so that could be a bit of a random experience. But it's still like the area where that happens is going to be the same for everybody, right? So I think it's
It's like that on purpose, and we don't use that too much.
very supportive of speedrun type of playstyle. Like Kris said earlier, like you could beat this game in like under 30 minutes if you're really that good.
Really?
That's probably an exaggeration. You can beat the game under an hour, I believe. If you're really that good and you really, really know what you're getting into and how to overcome it as quick as possible.
That's awesome.
This is a bigger game. This is quite a bit bigger game than Volgarr 1. And that game was, I think the world record's under 15 minutes now.
Wow.
And that's without using exploits and stuff. That's people being just really, really freaking good at the game, like really good at it. And, I'm flying through. The maps in Volgarr 2 are a little bit bigger, are quite a bit bigger, actually. And because of the newer mechanics and stuff, I don't know if that game will ever be at those times, but I don't know. We'll have to see what Lunatics does and some of these other, speedrunners that are obsessed about it, like how low they can get the time to be. But I'm sure it's going to be under 30 minutes for sure. Like they're just so super good at this stuff.
Yeah.
But it was just mind-boggling because even myself playing through Volgarr 2 and beating it as many times as I have, like Calvin said, I'm not trying to speedrun it or anything, but I can get through it now because I'm really, really good at the game in about an hour or so. But that's not normal. Like, it takes somebody a really long time to get there. That's after like playing the game for like 100 hours or something like that to get that good. Like,
I mean, I literally just died in the same place, this same exact place 2 times in a row.
Like the
I've
average
been playing
person
now for
ahead, sorry.
25 minutes now, I think, about, maybe a little more. I don't know. Time's going by pretty quickly. And I don't know. How many levels are in this game, actually? I probably should ask that question.
There's 5. You're on the first one, and then there's a secret level.
Yeah, 5 for the main storyline and a secret one that you can unlock.
Right. So then, and each of those levels is divided into, like, let's call it
2 sections.
2 sections. Oh, yep. Okay, got it. So I'm on the second section of the first level.
Yep.
How close was I to beating this section a moment ago? Because I got to the part where I was
you're
getting
about
up that
halfway
wall.
right now.
About halfway.
Oh, right there. Oh, so I was pretty close to the end of this section earlier when I was scaling up that wall thing, and I had the flaming sword and that kind of thing, right?
Well, yeah. So you just unlocked something here.
Oh yeah.
This is part of the narrative story, without spoiling the ending or whatever. But the more continues you use, the more of your soul Volgarr loses. Okay. So that's why he starts to shift colors as you continue.
Oh.
He doesn't look normal. He starts to look more and more sick. And now you've gotten to the point where you've basically become undead Volgarr. You're a zombie now. You're green.
Oh, cool.
And if you notice, the HUD changed from gold to bone white. And you can't actually be hurt by anything anymore. The only thing that can really kill you now is if you fall into a death pit.
Oh wait, so I'm invulnerable now?
Yeah, you've basically unlocked cheat mode because you've been continuing so
Oh,
much.
I don't like that. Oh man, all right, cool. I mean, I was hoping I could still be punished, but that explains why I was all right, cool. That
But
explains a lot. I'm pretty
that's
sure I was great at the other thing.
so now
Yeah,
the reason that this is here is for folks that just want to kind of get through the game and see the content.
yeah,
But your reaction to this is the reaction that I think a lot of people are going to have, or they're going to be, crap, it became Undead Volgar. They're going to go back to the beginning, delete this, and then start over because they want to be able to get a better ending, or they're going to want to be able to play through the game. But what this is going to allow you to do is learn the enemy types. It's going to allow you to learn the layout of the game and stuff like that if you
yep,
want to.
totally.
But a lot of players are going to be like, nah, I don't want to do this because now I've unlocked baby Volgar mode, and you know.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. I think that's good because some people they even without that knowledge, it's like even without the ability to get hit, it's still a challenge, right? And it's a good way to see it through.
Sure. You're
And
still going to
then
get knocked around and
exactly.
you're still going to die because you're going to miss jumps and fall into pits.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's cool. That's nice. So is there a further state than this, or is that
no,
that's
that's it.
Okay, got it. Cool. And how many endings are there in the game?
6, I think.
Oh man. Okay.
But if you were to complete the game and do this, you have gotten the worst ending.
Right.
But yeah.
But even on top of that, it's not just a binary thing where it's like you finish it as a zombie or you finish it as not a zombie. There are actually like a whole bunch of other.
Yep, everything in between. Yep.
That's cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, in the spirit of not having you guys watch me suffer any further, I think I'm just gonna wrap up the gameplay feed here after just killing this guy because he just hit me and I'm upset about that. But I can't die, so that's his problem. All right, he did it. He's dead. All right, so cool. Well, it's good stuff. Anything I should actually ask, actually, while I'm still playing, is there anything that we didn't talk about here that you want people to know about Volgar 2?
Yes, actually, a little bit talking about how you just unlocked the undead mode and how this is almost like a cheat mode or whatever. There are some player concerns out there going, "Oh my gosh, you've kind of ruined Volgar by allowing this to be in here or whatever." To them, I would say I did not. As you can see, it doesn't take anything away from the speedrunners. It doesn't take away anything from the hardcore players. If you're a player who's streaming this game, as we were just doing in this podcast and playing and showing it, you're obviously you look like the Incredible Hulk. You're obviously in a cheat mode. So you're not going to be able to pretend like you're super good at Volgar on your live stream or whatever, or on Twitch and say, look how good I am at Volgar. No, you're obviously in a cheat mode. Like, you know what I mean? So It doesn't take away anything from the hardcore players to allow other people to play in this.
Yes, I agree.
Because there's a visual, obvious representation of what's going on here, right? So that's all I'd really like to say about that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more before we close this out. I like to ask. Recently, I've been asking this question of everybody joining the podcast, especially for the first time. We could start with you, Kris, which is, what's your favorite part about the job? What's your favorite part about doing what you do? It could be specific to Volgar 2. It could be in general. But what is it? What is your favorite part of that process?
My absolute favorite part of the process is when everybody gets to play it. That's the part that I love. I love seeing people just enjoy it and hate it. Like that's the thing with it. I've got a binder. Some of my funniest things ever is when I get I call it fan mail, but it's really hate mail. But people will send like really nasty hate mail to me or something like that over it or whatever from the first game I have, and I read it sometimes for inspiration, and they just crack me up. They're funny. Yeah. But just watching people really love the game, just getting it in their hands, seeing how they're playing it with their friends. Like the other night, I just discovered these guys from Spain and I don't recommend anybody does this because it's super dangerous for the game like this. They decided they're going to play Volgar, and every time they died, they'd have to pass the controller and take a shot.
Oh
and
my gosh.
They're playing a drinking game every time they died in Volgar. As you can see, that's a really dangerous thing to do. But it was really funny just to see them sitting with their group of friends having fun, time together playing the game. But that's my favorite part of the process. Of course, there's other things that I enjoy about making the games. There's art and design and thinking about all these different things. That's fine and dandy. But the whole point of that is to get it out into the world for people to enjoy. And Volgar 2 would have never happened if people weren't loud about it. Like if they didn't just constantly hound me about it all the time. I mean, they made so much noise about it that a publisher was saying, "Hey, let's make the game." So, you know, that's the thing, and it makes me happy that people care about it that much.
Yeah. Well, the game's awesome. So yeah, it's definitely worthy of it, and super excited about the sequel. I'm thinking about there's some sort of correlation. I'm kind of working through it in my head where when you die, you take a shot instead of putting in a quarter. It's like you're going to be broke or dead. One of those things will happen first. It's kind of like a race.
Well, yeah, and the more you drink, the worse
vices,
you get at the game too. It's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, there's some sort of like weird modern corollary. It's like we can't take your quarter, but we'll take your soul with a drink.
Yep.
Calvin, how about yourself, fellow producer at Digital Eclipse? What's your favorite part of the job?
I mean, it's kind of like what Kris said, right? Like getting it out there. But I mean, I as a producer, it's really cool to kind of like see the ideas of what a game could be from like literally like conversations or like chicken scratch on a napkin to actually turning into something that is playable, that actually can be shared with people, that is actually like an experience that you could say is fun or it sucks or needs to be worked on a little or oh my god, that's amazing, right? The whole creative process of taking that from just something that existed in somebody's mind or a few people's minds and then actually getting it out to people and finally seeing how it hits. Because there's so much you can try to anticipate when you are making a game. There's so many moments and conversations where you're like, I think the players are going to react to it like this, or I don't know if players are going to like that, right? And then you kind of, read the tea leaves, call your shot, and like go forward with it. And then actually seeing it go out there, it actually come out live. Like this undead mode that you talked about, or that you discovered, has been exactly like what we thought it would be. It kind of be like a hit or a miss. Like some people are thrilled by it, and they're just like, "Oh my god, thank you," because I'm getting absolutely brutalized by this game, but I can keep going. And then some people who are more like challenge minded or prideful would be like, man, I don't like this, and they'll play it for a little bit, and then they'll go back to the beginning and start again, and they're like, how do I turn it off, right? And that's kind of how we saw it was going to be, but not really getting to see that actually happen with our fans or players until now that is actually coming out soon and actually being seen by the wild. It's just like such a cool, like rewarding process than taking something from nothing.
Awesome. It's good stuff. Well, fellas, thank you for joining me. I really appreciated it. Hopefully you had some fun. Kris, do you want people to find you? Can they find you on the internets? If so, where would they find you?
Oh, sure. I am at Volgar on X, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah. Crazy Viking Studios can be found on Facebook and crazyvikingstudios.com.
Cool.
Pretty much it.
Awesome. All these links will be in the description as below. Surprise, surprise. Calvin, how about yourself?
I'm actually not too active on socials, but
you can find him on the streets.
Yeah, that's where you can find me on the streets at gaming conventions or on LinkedIn. So that's where you can find me.
I respect that. You can follow me at Jays of Doom on Twitter. Once again, reminder, Wishlist, Preorder, Volgar 2, links below. Yars Rising from Atari. Join the Discord, Atari's Discord specifically. No Digital Eclipse Discord, right? Just checking.
There's no Digital Eclipse Discord, but there is a Digital Eclipse X, Twitter, Twitch, which I do have to say something about as well.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're tuning in on Digital Eclipse Twitch side, we have our good friend, Miss Slaughter, who typically takes over our sister studio, Night Dive Studios Twitch stream. This week, she would have just done a first of 4 weeks on Digital Eclipse's Twitch stream talking about Volgar. And tune in to our Digital Eclipse Twitch stream with her next week, and you'll see her playing this game on her own without the distractions of me and Kris. And you can see how her progress goes. And feel free to let Jason know on his socials about which one performed better of the two.
She's going to have the edge because she's playing for a week straight. I think, yeah, I think eventually I think she'll have the edge probably after about 30 minutes of gameplay. Cool, but we'll have those links below as well. Guys, thank you again for joining me. Really appreciate it. Game looks awesome. I'm looking forward to playing it on Switch because that's where I'd really like to play this with the world's worst D-pad and handheld mode, and that's what I'm going to do. So, but I think this game would look awesome on like that smaller screen on the OLED panel.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm like, super stoked to play it on that. It's going to be great, and there's just something about that retro feel and Nintendo hardware that just works like chocolate and peanut butter. So, thanks a lot, guys, and for everybody listening, we'll be back in a couple weeks.
Thanks. Jason.
Bye.
Thank you.